I used to think trust was the bedrock of marriage, the unspoken vow that went deeper than any ring or promise. It was the way Isla would touch my hand in the morning, the way she'd finish my sentences, or laugh before I'd even told the punchline. But lately, that trust had started to taste different. Literally. It started with a mug of tea. She brought it to me the way she always did, two hands wrapped around the ceramic, steam curling between us like a ribbon of peace. "Chamomile and honey," she'd said, her voice soft, her smile easy. I took it, kissed her cheek, and didn't think twice. But that night, after the first few sips, something curled in the back of my throat. Not bitterness, not even metallic, just wrong, something that didn't belong. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the honey had crystallized. Maybe the tea was too old. But when I woke up hours later, groggy and drenched in sweat, with the room spinning around me like I'd been on a ship, my first thought wasn't about the tea. It was about Isla. I reached for her side of the bed and found it cold. Empty. The next night, she brought it again. Same warmth in her hands. Same gentle kiss. But the moment I tasted it, I knew I wasn't imagining things. It was the same aftertaste, just beneath the floral sweetness, something medicinal. I didn't say anything. Just nodded, drank half, then pretended I was more tired than I really was and collapsed into bed. That's when the dream started. It wasn't the usual jumbled mess of memory and fantasy. These were vivid, specific, dark figures at the foot of the bed, whispered warnings I couldn't quite make out. My chest heavy, like someone was pressing down, holding me still. I'd wake gasping for air, my skin ice cold and clammy, and Isla would always be there. Calm. Too calm. Stroking my hair like I was a child. Just a nightmare, she'd whisper. Stress. It's been a long month. Maybe she was right. Work had been intense. Deadlines. Meetings. A server breach that left half our team pulling overnight shifts. So I let it go. Or tried to. But the fatigue wouldn't let go of me. It clung like fog. I started blacking out, hours vanishing from my day with no explanation. I'd come to in the middle of a conversation I didn't remember starting. Or wake up on the couch with the TV on and no idea how I got there. Still, every night, without fail, Isla would bring me tea. It became ritual, unbreakable, expected, and each time I swallowed, my instincts screamed at me, even as my rational mind tried to silence them. The turning point came on a Thursday. Isla had just stepped out to pick up groceries. I was alone in the kitchen, my cup still steaming beside the sink. I lifted it to my nose and inhaled deeply. Chamomile. Honey. But underneath, something sharp. Faint, but unmistakable. My pulse quickened. My hands shook. I poured it down the drain. The tea swirled, a pale golden spiral disappearing into the pipes. I rinsed the cup, dried it, and set it exactly where she'd left it. Then I turned off the lights, curled up on the couch, and waited. I kept my breathing slow, shallow, steady, like sleep. I let my body go slack, limbs loose, head tilted at just the right angle. I counted the seconds, then the minutes. Eventually, I heard the door open. Her keys dropped into the bowl by the console table. Soft footsteps crossed the hardwood. I didn't move, not even when she paused beside me. I could feel her watching me, feel the weight of her stare on my skin. She crouched down, touched my cheek gently. "Mason," she whispered, and there was so much tenderness in it that for a moment, I almost doubted myself again. But then, as she stood and walked away, I heard the creak of the hallway floorboards, the faint sound of a drawer sliding open. My heart pounded in my chest like a drumbeat. I wanted to open my eyes, to leap up and confront her. But I didn't. I waited, still and silent. Then I heard something else, something that froze the blood in my veins. The soft, unmistakable sound of my laptop opening. It had been locked. I was sure of that. I always locked it. Isla didn't know the password, or at least, I thought she didn't. But the clicks came fast, confident, like muscle memory. I strained to hear. The muffled hum of the hard drive, the sound of typing, pages loading, then the faint buzz of her phone's camera shutter. Again and again, I waited another 10 minutes before moving. When I finally stood, my knees were weak, my breath shallow. I tiptoed down the hallway, heart hammering, every sense on fire. She didn't hear me. Her back was to me, head bent over the screen, phone in hand. She was photographing something, my documents, bank statements, insurance papers, my passport. And then she pulled out something I hadn't seen in years, a power of attorney form. My signature stared back at me, shaky and perfect, but not mine. A forgery. My mouth went dry. My world shifted. She wasn't just drugging me. She was preparing to become me, or erase me. I stepped back slowly, careful not to let the floorboards betray me. I returned to the couch and resumed my position, eyes closed, body limp, heart racing so hard I thought it might give me away. Minutes later, I heard the laptop close. Isla's footsteps returned. She bent down again, touched my arm lightly. "You're so tired these days," she murmured. "I worry about you." I wanted to scream, to grab her hand and ask why, but instead, I let the silence stretch between us. When she walked away for the last time that night, I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, the taste of betrayal thick in my mouth. That was the moment I stopped trusting her tea, and I started trusting myself. 6 months ago, I was thriving. That's the part that still haunts me, the contrast. The way life had felt secure, full, purposeful. I was a senior systems engineer at a respected cybersecurity firm in Edinburgh. My team relied on me. Clients trusted me. I was known for my sharp memory, my precision with code, the way I could spot inconsistencies in a system like a bloodhound trailing a scent. I didn't just do the work, I lived it. Every line of code had rhythm to me. Patterns spoke louder than words. And then, slowly, they didn't. It started small. I missed a team sync. Nothing huge, just forgot the time zone change for a call with a US-based client. I brushed it off, blamed it on stress, a bad night's sleep. But the forgetfulness became more than occasional. Passwords I'd used for years suddenly slipped my mind. I'd stare at my screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard, completely blank, like someone had quietly reached inside me and turned the lights off. I'd walk into rooms with purpose and leave without ever remembering why I went in. Conversations at work would fade halfway through, the words of my coworkers becoming mushy echoes. They were polite at first, sympathetic. "You all right, Mason? You've been working hard lately. Want to take a breather?" I smiled through it, nodded, pretended everything was fine. But inside, panic started spreading its roots. At home, Isla became the bomb. Or at least, that's how she framed it. She'd stroke the back of my neck when I sat slumped on the couch, whispering words like overworked, burnout, need rest. She started preparing my tea before I even asked, always the same chamomile and honey. "This will help," she'd murmur, placing the warm cup between my palms like it was holy. And I drank it, gratefully at first, because I wanted to believe the woman I loved saw me unraveling and wanted to help knit me back together. I began leaning on her more than I realized. She started organizing my schedule. "Just focus on resting, babe," she'd say, as she gently tugged my phone out of my hand. She changed my calendar settings, took calls for me when I overslept, made excuses to my team when I missed another meeting. "He's just a bit under the weather. He's working from home today. He's got a migraine." Her lies came so easily, I didn't even hear them at first. I was too tired, my mind too cloudy to notice I wasn't steering my own life anymore. There was one afternoon I'll never forget, because it felt like a line had been crossed, even if I couldn't name it then. I'd been sitting at my desk, trying to troubleshoot a critical error in a client's firewall. My fingers moved sluggishly, the letters on the keyboard swimming slightly. Isla walked in with a smile, tea already in her hands, and placed it beside me. I thanked her, barely registering the taste as I took a sip. 10 minutes later, I woke up slouched in my chair, the monitor dark. An entire hour had vanished, and when I turned, she was there again, in the doorway, watching me. "You need to sleep more," she said. "You're pushing yourself too hard." At that point, I still clung to the belief that I was the problem. Maybe my brain was breaking down. Maybe I had early-onset dementia, or a neurological disorder no one had caught yet. I considered seeing a doctor, but Isla convinced me otherwise. "They'll just pump you full of pills," she warned, "and they'll put something permanent on your medical records. You're just burned out, Mason. I'm here. Let me take care of you." And I let her. God help me, I let her. She began managing the finances to help take pressure off. It seemed logical. I wasn't thinking clearly, and bills still had to be paid. I handed her access to my banking apps. I gave her my passwords. I even signed some paperwork she said was for consolidating accounts, documents I barely read because my vision would blur when I focused too long on the lines. The most disturbing part? I remember feeling grateful. The deeper I sank into the fog, the more I leaned into her version of reality. That I was just tired. That the world was too fast, too chaotic, and she was my safe place. The tea became ritual. Her voice became the only one that made sense. When my coworkers started checking in less frequently, when my boss gently suggested I take an extended leave, Isla nodded approvingly. "It's exactly what you need," she said. I stopped driving. My coordination was off. Isla said she was worried about me on the road, and I agreed. She offered to drive me to appointments, pick up groceries, handle errands. She did it all with that calm, nurturing demeanor that made questioning her feel like betrayal. One night, I tried to journal, something I hadn't done in years. I wanted to capture what I was experiencing, maybe make sense of it. I opened my notebook, pen in hand, and stared at the page. Nothing came. My brain felt like cotton. I wrote a single sentence. "Something's wrong with me," and then crossed it out, ashamed. Because deep down, a whisper had started. Faint, persistent. What if nothing was wrong with me? What if it was her? The thought came like a crack in glass, quiet at first, but spreading fast. I started noticing things again. Like how she always insisted I drink the tea while it was hot. How she watched me after I finished. How her expression subtly shifted when I left the mug untouched. The night I faked falling asleep and saw her pick up the mug, glance inside, and frown, like she was disappointed, it all clicked. Trust had been a given in our marriage. A soft, unquestioned assumption. But now, it was a variable. A puzzle piece that didn't fit anymore. I started to pull away. Silently. Carefully. I didn't want her to know I was beginning to wake up. Because if I was right, if she was behind this fog in my mind, I needed to be smart. I needed to pretend. And most of all, I needed to stop drinking the tea. Sleep used to be my refuge. A place where the noise of the world dimmed, and my mind, always busy, always thinking, could finally drift into something resembling peace. But not anymore. Not since the fog took root. Now sleep was a prison. A haunting cycle of paralysis and confusion. I would lie down, bone-tired from days that felt like years, only to wake hours later in a sweat-soaked tangle of sheets, heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. The dreams weren't dreams anymore. They were warnings. Cages. Chains. It began with the sensation of being watched. Not the mild discomfort of paranoia, but the bone-deep certainty that someone was hovering just out of reach, above me, beside me, behind the veil of unconsciousness. In the dreams, I couldn't move. I'd try to lift my arm, scream, roll over, nothing. I'd just lie there, frozen, with a weight pressing into my chest like a slab of concrete. Sometimes I'd hear a voice. Not loud, not clear, just a whisper at the edge of recognition. Other times I saw shapes, figures in the shadows, unmoving, faceless, just there. One night, I dreamed Isla was sitting on the edge of the bed, brushing my hair with her fingers, the way she used to when we were still new and in love. But in the dream, her touch didn't feel warm. It felt calculated, cold, like a scientist examining a test subject. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her fingers slipped down to my neck and rested there, soft at first, then firmer. And when I finally jolted awake, gasping for breath, she was there in real life, lying beside me, eyes wide open, watching me. She smiled, like nothing was wrong. Another bad dream? I nodded, throat dry, hands shaking. She kissed my forehead and said, "It's the stress, Mason. You've been working yourself too hard. You just need to rest." Her words came with practiced ease, a soothing cadence that should have comforted me. But they didn't, because the way she said it, like she'd rehearsed it, like she expected this exact reaction, made something shift in me. Something small but seismic. I started keeping a notebook by the bed. I wrote down everything I could remember as soon as I woke. Fragments of images, phrases, sensations. The pages filled fast. Can't move. She's standing over me. Eyes open. Whispers in the dark. Reading it all together felt like staring into a cracked mirror. My dreams weren't random. They were patterns. Repetitions. Like someone was trying to show me the truth in a language my waking self couldn't understand. The more I documented, the clearer it became. Every time I drank that tea, the dreams deepened. More vivid. More sinister. I even tried skipping the tea once or twice, pouring it into a plant when she wasn't looking. Those nights, the dreams were lighter, fuzzier, less like messages and more like memory soup. Still unsettling, but not the same suffocating kind. and every time I skipped it, Isla would frown the next morning. Just slightly. Like the code she was trying to run had failed to execute. She never asked if I'd finished my tea, but she'd check the mug. Always. Quietly, as if it was a routine she didn't want me to notice. That's when I began to believe the dreams weren't my mind unraveling. They were pieces of something Isla didn't want me to see. One particularly bad night, I dreamed I was tied to our bed, not just metaphorically. Actual ropes. I couldn't breathe. Isla was whispering something in a language I didn't know. And then, as I stared at the ceiling, a drop of something warm hit my forehead. I looked up, still in the dream, and saw a crack forming in the ceiling above me, red liquid oozing through like blood from a wound. I screamed, or tried to, but no sound came out. When I snapped awake, there were nail marks in my palm from where I'd clenched my fist too tightly. Isla wasn't in bed. I sat up, dizzy, and called her name. She walked in calmly a moment later, hair down, robe tied neatly. You called me. I nodded. I think I had sleep paralysis. She tilted her head. That's common when you're anxious. And you've been anxious, Mason. I stared at her. What time is it? She looked at the clock. 3:42. Where were you? Bathroom, she said without hesitation. I didn't want to wake you. And maybe that's exactly where she had been. Maybe. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't just stepped out to avoid the flush of the toilet. I felt like I'd been alone in a room I didn't recognize, and she'd only walked in after the damage was done. From then on, I began feigning deeper sleep, lying perfectly still while she moved around me at night. Sometimes she just stood at the bedroom door, as if listening to something only she could hear. Other times, I'd sense her hovering near the bed, and I'd force myself not to flinch. I didn't know what I was waiting for, some definitive sign of what she was doing. But I knew if I moved too soon, she'd know I was onto her. And whatever this game was, I had the gut-deep certainty that pretending was the only move I had left. The worst dream came 2 weeks later. I was in our bedroom again, but everything was wrong. The walls were dripping. The furniture distorted, like it had been melted in the sun. Isla stood in the corner, her back to me. I couldn't see what she was holding, but she was whispering the same sentence over and over. This is how you fade. This is how you fade. I tried to scream. I wanted to run, but all I could do was lie there and listen as her words looped endlessly in the dark. When I finally opened my eyes, Isla was asleep beside me, her back to me, breathing soft. But her hand was resting on my chest, just lightly, right over my heart. I didn't move. I didn't sleep again that night. I kept telling myself there had to be a rational explanation, that I was unraveling, that maybe she was right, maybe I was pushing myself too hard. But even at my lowest, I never dreamed in symbols this sharp, never felt fear this real. Something was wrong, not just with me, with her, with us. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't tell her what I was feeling, because I no longer believed I could. And I no longer believed my dreams were just dreams. I didn't call Arjun right away. I hesitated. For days, maybe longer. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I was terrified that once I said the words out loud, they'd become real. Suspicion had a way of poisoning everything. And yet, my silence had already cost me clarity. I was lost in my own house, my own body. A stranger in both. I needed something solid. Someone who knew me before all of this. Arjun had been one of my closest friends at university. Bright, principled, and fiercely loyal. He was the kind of person who could spot a half-truth a mile away. He also happened to be a pharmacist with a deep, almost obsessive knowledge of sedatives and neurochemistry. We hadn't spoken in a while, not since he moved to Glasgow, but that didn't matter now. I dug through old contacts until I found his number. When I heard his voice, it was like stepping into the past. Mason, he said, surprised but warm. Been ages, mate. You all right? That question, the way everyone asked it lately, like they already suspected I wasn't. I swallowed hard. I'm not sure. I think something's wrong with me. Or maybe not with me. I don't know how to explain it. Start slow, he said, instantly serious. What's going on? I paced the kitchen as I spoke, eyes flicking toward the hallway every few seconds to make sure Isla wasn't near. I didn't tell him everything. Not yet. Just the symptoms, the brain fog, the sudden fatigue, the blackouts, the strange vivid dreams. And the tea. I made sure to mention the tea. There was a pause. Then his voice dropped. Has Isla been giving you the tea every night? Yes. Chamomile and honey. She says it's for stress. He didn't respond right away. I could hear the faint sound of him typing, maybe searching something. Then he said, slowly, "Do not drink that tea again. Not even a sip. Do you understand?" A chill crawled down my spine. What are you thinking? I can't say for sure without testing it, but the symptoms you're describing, especially the mental fog and dissociation, they're consistent with certain sedatives. Some you'd never taste if they were dosed low enough and masked with herbal infusions and honey. You're saying she could be drugging me? I'm saying it's a possibility. And if she is, it wouldn't be something obvious. Not a high dose. Microdosing over time is more effective if the goal isn't to knock you out, but to wear you down, to make you compliant, confused, docile. I leaned against the counter, blood draining from my face. Christ. Mason, listen to me carefully, Arjun continued, his tone clipped and urgent now. Don't confront her. Not yet. You have to assume she's aware of every move you make. Start documenting everything. What you eat, when you sleep, how you feel after drinking the tea. And if you can, keep some of it. In a sealed container. I'll tell you how to store it for testing. My hands were shaking. I opened the cutlery drawer and closed it again, for no reason at all. I couldn't think straight. What if she knows I'm onto her? Then act like you don't. Keep your behavior exactly the same. Drink the tea, but don't swallow. Fake it. Get the sample. And above all, do not let her know you've spoken to anyone. Not even me. I nodded, forgetting he couldn't see me. All right. Okay. I'll try. We ended the call with a code phrase he made me repeat back. I'm sleeping better now. If I ever texted or said that, it meant I was in danger. The gravity of it hit me in waves. I was being treated like a patient with a terminal diagnosis, fragile, easily broken, under threat. Except the illness wasn't in my body. It was in the house, in the relationship, in the quiet spaces between Isla's smiles and the teacup she cradled each night like a gift. That evening, I behaved like nothing had changed. I greeted Isla with the same exhausted smile. Let her run her fingers down my arm as she asked how I was feeling. Still tired, I said, which was true, though not in the way she thought. She brought the tea to me just like always, set it on the side table, kissed my temple, sat across from me on the couch and asked what I wanted to watch. Her eyes studied me carefully, looking for cracks. I reached for the tea slowly, held it with both hands, let the steam rise toward my face and forced my expression into something neutral. Thanks, I murmured. She smiled. Drink it before it gets cold. I sipped. Barely, just enough to wet my lips. I kept my movements lazy and slow, like the sleepiness was already settling in. I set the mug down half empty, pretended to watch the screen while my thoughts raced. Isla curled her legs up under her and leaned into me. Everything about her posture was warm, familiar, loving, but my body tensed as she rested her head on my shoulder. Do you remember our honeymoon? She asked suddenly, her voice dreamy. My heart jumped. I forced a nod. Of course. You fell asleep in the hammock with that book on your chest. I remember thinking, this is what peace looks like. I didn't respond. My throat had closed up. Eventually, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Took the cup with me. I emptied the remaining tea into a clean plastic container I'd stashed in the medicine cabinet. Rinsed the cup. Wiped it dry. Returned to the living room like nothing had happened. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. That night, I lay in bed with my eyes closed, breathing slow and deep, waiting for the moment I could no longer pretend to be normal. I had crossed a line. I was no longer a husband trying to heal. I was a man preparing for war. That night, I followed the routine like muscle memory. Dinner. Her soft humming while cleaning the kitchen. My careful nods and well-timed silences. Isla never once asked if I was feeling better. She didn't need to. She assumed the tea was still doing its work, making me slower, quieter, easier to mold. And that assumption was the key to everything. She handed me the cup just like always, her fingers grazing mine as she set it down. Still warm, she said. Don't wait too long. I won't. I murmured, eyes bleary by design, my voice just soft enough to sound half defeated. I curled into the far end of the couch and brought the mug to my lips. I let the tea touch my tongue, then swallowed nothing. Instead, I leaned back slowly, setting the mug on the side table like every other night. I'm going to step out and call Mom, Isla said. Won't be long. I nodded without looking at her. A single blink, just enough to suggest exhaustion. I heard the door click shut, counted to 10. Then I stood, walked to the potted ivy in the corner, The same IV that had started to yellow from weeks of being overfed the toxins meant for me. I poured the tea into the soil, then wiped the cup with a dish towel, making sure the inside was dry. I set it back on the table exactly as it had been, then glanced around the room once more. Nothing was out of place. I looked like a man slipping into the same manipulated sleep she'd grown used to. I headed to the bedroom, changed into a t-shirt and sweats, and crawled under the duvet. Then the real performance began. I lay still, very still. My breathing was deep and even, just as it had been on all those nights she stood over me. I had trained myself to control the rhythm: inhale for 4 seconds, hold, exhale for 6. Repeat. My body slackened the way it did when the tea used to hit me, my chest rising in lazy waves. I let my mouth fall slightly open, my eyes shut just enough so no light escaped. Time passed. I don't know how long. The darkness behind my eyelids began to move, my mind spinning with possibilities. What would she do? Check my pulse. Talk to someone. Take something. The bedroom door creaked open. I didn't flinch. Soft footsteps crossed the room. I could feel her presence before she reached the bed. Some kind of internal radar that pinged from the cold edge of her shadow. I wanted to roll over, to shout, to pull the whole curtain down. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I knew. Not until I saw. Her hand touched my arm. Lightly, like she was testing the water. "Mason," she whispered. I didn't move. A pause. Then another whisper. Closer to my ear this time. "Are you asleep?" I let out the faintest of exhales. Just enough to pass the test. She lingered for a moment, her hand sliding down to my wrist, where my pulse thudded slow and steady. I felt her shift on the bed, then lift away. The mattress barely moved. She stepped back, quiet but not silent, then turned and walked out of the room. That was when I opened my eyes. I waited a full minute, then another. When I was sure she was gone, I slipped out from under the covers and moved to the doorway, barefoot. The hallway stretched ahead in dim light, shadows curling at the edges. I moved slowly, careful not to let the floorboards betray me. She had a rhythm. Once she believed I was asleep, she moved freely, like the world was hers again. I saw her silhouette first, in the soft glow of the laptop screen. She was sitting at the kitchen island, completely absorbed, back to me. I kept to the wall, staying just out of sight. I couldn't hear her yet, only the rapid click of keys and the occasional buzz of her phone. I crouched beside the archway, peeking just enough to see her reflection in the glass of the microwave. She looked calm, focused, not like a wife managing a household or helping her tired husband through a health scare, like someone executing a plan. I watched as she opened a folder on the laptop, my folder. Work documents, financial files, scanned signatures. She inserted a flash drive. Downloaded. Renamed. Opened my email account, my actual inbox, and began deleting select messages, forwarding others. Then she pulled out her phone and started taking photos of several sheets of paper she'd stacked beside the laptop. I squinted. The first was a copy of our joint insurance policy. Then came a page with my name at the top in bold. My birth certificate. A scanned signature. Another document. Blurry, but unmistakable. A power of attorney form. The signature on the bottom right wasn't mine. I covered my mouth with my hand. She wasn't just managing my affairs. She was rewriting them. I had suspected manipulation, control, even emotional cruelty. But this was something different. This was erasure. My hands balled into fists, but I forced myself to breathe, to stay hidden. If I lost it now, I'd lose everything. I needed proof. Pattern. Timing. Arjun had said she'd slip if she believed I was out cold, and she had. Everything was unfolding exactly how he predicted. I backed away from the corner. Quiet. Careful. Returned to the bedroom and slipped under the covers again. I lay there in the dark, heart racing, trying to absorb the enormity of what I'd seen. She was building a world where I didn't exist. Or worse, where I existed only on paper, controlled, silenced, disposable. She thought I was gone already, but I was very much awake. And now, so was the war. I waited until her breathing evened out. Isla always fell asleep quickly after completing whatever nightly ritual she thought would go unnoticed. That night, it was a mix of emails, file transfers, and stolen documentation, performed with the precision of someone who'd done it many times before. She returned to bed an hour later, slipped beneath the covers beside me, and pressed her body close like nothing had happened. I remained still, my breathing slow, pretending the tea had dragged me under like it always used to. She whispered something, soft, a murmur of affection or guilt or triumph. I couldn't tell. I didn't respond. I couldn't risk it. Once I was sure she was asleep, I opened my eyes. The room glowed faintly with streetlight leaking in from behind the blinds. I turned carefully and stared at her. Her face looked peaceful, beautiful even, the kind of expression I might have once reached for in the dark, hoping to catch her in that soft liminal state between sleep and love. But now it terrified me. The next morning, I was up before her. I showered, dressed, and made a quiet show of checking my phone at the table like it was a normal weekday. Isla walked in, yawning, her robe drawn tight, and kissed my cheek. "You look better today," she said. "Think I finally slept," I replied. "That tea really helped last night." She smiled at that. It took everything in me not to recoil. She left for work around 8:30. Said she had meetings, a lunch with a client, and might be late. I told her I'd be working from home. She didn't seem concerned. Why would she be? As far as she knew, I was still in her pocket, docile, drugged, declining. As soon as the doors shut, I got to work. I retrieved the laptop from the hidden compartment in my backpack. A secure machine, unlinked to anything on our home network, something I'd set up at Arjun's insistence. I booted it and opened the footage from the night before. A discreet camera had been tucked behind the lamp on the sideboard, pointed perfectly at the kitchen island. I watched her move, opening files, photographing documents, connecting USB drives. Every movement was practiced. Efficient. At one point, she logged into an account I didn't recognize. An online banking dashboard with a foreign URL. The interface wasn't in English. She transferred funds. A lot of them. Not from her account, but from mine. Or what used to be mine. The balances were draining into an international portfolio I hadn't authorized or even known existed. She had masked it with internal transfers, laundering it through savings pots, joint accounts, even a forgotten crypto wallet I hadn't touched since 2018. And then she opened the document that sealed it all. The power of attorney. My name forged across the bottom in a script that mimicked mine just closely enough to pass a glance. The file was labeled finalmason.pdf. Final. The word rang in my skull like a warning bell. She wasn't just planning an exit. She was building an escape plan. I paused the footage. My eyes burned. I stood, walked to the window, and stared at the quiet street outside. Everything looked the same. Calm. Normal. But I knew now that normal was dead. This wasn't some moment of marital distance or financial strain. Isla had crafted an entire parallel existence behind my back, one that required my absence, or my compliance, or my downfall. I opened the second camera feed, the one I'd hidden in the study. More footage. She had rifled through the filing cabinet I thought only I touched. She'd scanned everything. Tax returns, old contracts, a few personal letters from my parents that I hadn't even read in years. What would she want those for? Identity theft? Leverage? My thoughts spiraled. Every memory warped in real time. The late-night back rubs, the soft-spoken suggestions to let her handle things, the way she started volunteering to manage bills, to field work calls, to set up joint investments, all of it rewrote itself in my head. Not acts of love. Not support. Control. Disarmament. Disappearance. I sat back down and copied the footage to 2 separate drives. One went into my encrypted cloud. The other into a slim flash I slid into the lining of my jacket. Then I printed screenshots. Labeled files. Created a folder that looked more like a case file than anything else. I stared at the name on the screen, Isla Monroe, and felt the sickest part of it all. I still loved her. Or maybe I loved the version of her I thought existed. The Isla who used to make French toast at midnight when we couldn't sleep. The Isla who cried during that god-awful Pixar movie about time. The Isla who stood in the rain with me on our 5th anniversary because I forgot the umbrella and she said it felt more romantic that way. But that Isla was dead. And the one sleeping in my bed now? She was a stranger in my wife's skin. The day moved slowly. I stayed alert, kept my movements casual, made sure to move nothing she might notice. I left one browser tab open with a meaningless article so she'd think I'd wasted my day online. I even cooked dinner, her favorite risotto, to maintain the illusion. She returned home at 7, kissed my cheek again, asked how I was feeling. Better, I said. Almost back to normal. She smiled, touched my face, and I wondered how many other men she had played this part for. We ate dinner like any other couple. We laughed once, Something about her colleague spilling wine on his tie. For a second, I almost forgot. Almost. Then she reached across the table and said, "You've been more yourself lately. I'm glad the tea's working." I didn't blink. Just nodded. Me too. After she went to bed, I sat at the dining table alone and looked at the empty chair across from me. She thinks I'm asleep. That's when she moves. That's when she becomes who she really is. And now, I know who she is. She lives two lives. And tonight, I officially entered the second one. The next morning, I left early, earlier than I ever had in recent months. Isla didn't question it. She barely stirred when I kissed her forehead and whispered something about a team call. I moved like a man with a routine, like someone heading back to life. And maybe in a way, I was. Because the life she thought she was burying, I was digging it out. The cab ride across town was quiet. Foggy streets rolled past the window, still half asleep and innocent. I clenched the flash drive in my coat pocket the whole time, fingers wrapped around it like it was a key to something sacred. By the time we pulled up to the small law office tucked between a bakery and an antique shop on a narrow Edinburgh lane, my heart was hammering like I was walking into court instead of a consultation. Marianne Rhodes didn't look like I expected. She was younger, sharper, eyes too observant to let anything slide. She didn't offer pleasantries, just motioned me to the seat across from her desk and said, "Show me what you have." I slid the drive across the table. "I was told you're discreet." "I'm expensive," she replied. "Discretion is included." I watched her plug it into her encrypted device, fingers moving fast as she opened the footage and files. No reaction crossed her face as she watched Isla on screen, just steady concentration. She paused at the document labeled finalmason.pdf and read it twice. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. "You're not being paranoid." "I'm relieved and terrified to hear that," I said, my voice dry. "She's orchestrating a financial and legal repositioning. Quiet enough not to raise flags. But make no mistake, this isn't impulsive. This is a build. A build." Marianne leaned back. "Your accounts. The forged power of attorney. The policy documentation. She's consolidating control. If you were ever deemed medically incapacitated or disappeared without explanation, she'd be in charge of everything. Your assets. Decisions. Estate. The digital trail she's created is sophisticated, but not invisible." I swallowed hard. "How close is she to pulling it off?" "She's close," Marianne said. "But she thinks you're still under. That's your advantage." She laid out options. Legal pathways, contingencies. Terms like preventive injunction, identity lock, asset freeze. I nodded through most of it, mind spinning. "I can draft a motion to secure your accounts within 24 hours, she said. "But we'll need to act fast and quiet. Do you have a safe location to move anything physical she might try to access?" "Like what?" "Passports, bank cards, birth certificates, anything she could weaponize. Put them in a lockbox under your name alone, not joint, and somewhere she doesn't know exists." I thought of the small storage facility on Leith Walk, one I used years ago during a home renovation. The key was still in my tool drawer. "I have a place." "Good." "And Mason," she said, locking eyes with me, "we're not just protecting your identity. We're preparing for a confrontation. Don't wait until she strikes. Make sure when she does, you've already neutralized the damage." I left her office with a folder tucked into my coat and a clarity I hadn't felt in months. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about strategy. Isla had made her move, piece by piece, assuming I would never wake up to the board. But now I saw every square, every pawn she'd pushed forward. That afternoon, I drove to the storage unit. The place hadn't changed. Same chipped walls, same keypad with keys that stuck slightly when you typed in the code. I opened my old unit and cleared the dust off the steel lockbox I'd once used for tools and contracts. Inside, I placed everything: my passport, financial statements, the original deed to the flat. I even dropped in the small velvet box that held the wedding band I hadn't worn in 2 months. Just before I shut the lid, I added something else: a photo of Isla and me on our 3rd anniversary. We were laughing, drenched from the rain, sitting on a bench in the Scottish Highlands. That moment had felt real. Maybe it was. Maybe the woman in that picture had loved me once. But the woman I lived with now? She was a different entity entirely. After locking the box, I went home. Isla was on the couch, phone in hand. I was lighting up like I'd just come home from war. "Hey, stranger," she said, patting the seat beside her. "I missed you today." I forced a chuckle, dropping my coat. Had a lot to catch up on. I'm starting to feel like myself again. That's good, she said, kissing my cheek. I've been worried about you. I nodded. Thanks for keeping things running while I've been out of it. She beamed. Of course. You don't have to thank me. But I did thank her. Again and again. With smiles, with fake yawns, with sips of tea I never swallowed. Every lie she told was matched by one of mine. And the longer I played along, the more confident she became. That confidence would be her undoing. That night, I installed 2 more hidden cameras. One in the bookshelf, another near the hallway thermostat. I synced the footage to a private server accessible only through the laptop Arjun helped me encrypt. And then I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the clock while Isla made her usual cup. She handed it to me with the same grace, the same warmth. You've been doing better, she said softly. I can tell. Must be the tea, I said, raising the mug like a toast. And in that moment, as I watched her watching me, I realized something. She had no idea how awake I really was. 3 nights later, the cameras gave me the truth I needed. It was subtle, almost too subtle, like everything she did. Isla didn't storm through our life. She drifted quietly, like smoke curling beneath doors, seeping into cracks, unnoticed until the air was already poison. But this time, I saw it. I saw everything. That night had been routine. That was the genius of her rhythm. Repetition softened the edges of her deception. We'd eaten together. She told me about a new client, someone in private wealth from Dubai who wanted to move funds discreetly. I smiled and nodded like I cared. Then came the tea. Always the tea. I drank it, swirled it against my lips, let it cling to the inside of the cup. I made sure some of it stained my tongue, just enough to pass the kiss she gave me after. Isla had always been observant. Sloppy people don't orchestrate disappearances. She looked at me for a moment longer than usual after that kiss. But then she smiled, turned, and disappeared into the hallway. She thought she'd won. Again. Once she was in the bedroom, I moved fast. I emptied the cup into the ivy and took it to the sink, rinsing it, drying it. Then I stepped into the spare room where my secure laptop was hidden inside a locked cabinet I installed last week. The feed was live, crisp, clear. Every inch of the kitchen visible from 2 different angles. I fast-forwarded, just to be sure. There. The moment she reappeared. She walked into the kitchen with a different energy than she'd had moments before. Focused. Task-oriented. Her robe swayed around her as she moved to the spice rack. The top shelf. She reached behind the stacked jars of turmeric, cayenne, and cloves. From behind a dusty canister labeled fennel seeds, she pulled a small amber bottle. I paused the footage. Zoomed in. The label was partially torn, but the chemical name remained. I'd seen it before in my own research, and Arjun had mentioned it more than once. Zolpidem, a sedative, commonly used for sleep, commonly abused for manipulation. I hit play. She unscrewed the dropper top, squeezed the rubber bulb, and released a few clear drops into a cup she'd pulled from the shelf. Then she stirred, not with a spoon, but a small silver stir stick. She was meticulous, like a chemist, like someone who had done this many times and had a system. Then she rinsed the stirrer, dried it, and placed both the bottle and the stick back behind the spice rack. She rearranged the jars in front of it so that nothing looked disturbed. You'd never notice. Not unless you knew to look. She carried the cup to the table, my usual seat, and placed it there. It was a backup, a second dose. Maybe she thought I hadn't finished the first. Or maybe she just liked control so much she needed to be certain. I watched her leave the room, her posture loose, content. She thought the game was still hers. I paused the footage and leaned back in my chair. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with the weight of the truth. But it was also a kind of freedom. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining the fatigue or the memory loss or the paralysis in my dreams. I'd been targeted, groomed, dosed. And now, I had proof. I copied the footage to 2 drives immediately. One went into the fireproof box in the storage unit, the other uploaded to the cloud via an encrypted portal Marianne had provided. I texted Arjun 2 words. We're right. He responded within a minute. You need to get out. Now. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not while the web was still spinning. I needed to wait for the moment she tried to pull it tight, when she filed something, moved an asset, called someone thinking I was too far gone to resist. I needed to be still and watch the spider finish her pattern. The next morning, I confronted her. Not directly. That would have been too easy, too emotional. And if Isla had taught me anything, It was that silence disarms better than rage. I sat across from her at breakfast and said, "You ever hear of Zolpidem?" She didn't flinch. She was buttering toast. "Isn't that for sleep?" I sipped my tea I made myself. Yeah, some people abuse it. Slips right past most blood panels. Makes people forgetful. Makes them tired. Some even hallucinate. She looked up from her toast, smiling like I'd told her a joke. Why the sudden interest in pharmaceuticals? I shrugged. I was reading an article. You know me. Can't resist a good medical rabbit hole. Well, she said, eyes flicking to the clock, you've always been the curious type. And that was it. No panic. No denial. But I saw something new in her expression that morning. A flicker, quick and buried beneath her practiced charm. She was recalculating. By midday, I received an email from Marianne. The footage and documents had been reviewed. The legal motion to freeze my assets was filed. Isla's digital fingerprints were enough to convince a judge to approve a silent injunction. Everything she thought she had access to, credit, insurance, funds, was about to go dark. We even arranged to change the locks while she was at work. By the time she returned home the following evening, the entire house would be wired and locked tighter than a server room. But that night, after the footage, was the first night I truly saw her. Not just through the cameras, through the layers, through the lies. The woman who used to whisper my name like a prayer now stood in our home, tampering with my life like I was just a code she needed to crack. She didn't know the cameras were watching. She didn't know the man she thought was broken had already started rebuilding. That night, I didn't fake my sleep. I didn't close my eyes. I sat in the dark and listened to the sound of her breathing beside me. The same breath that used to comfort me. Now it sounded like a countdown. I moved into Arjun's spare flat across the city that same night, just as planned. Isla had been staying late at her office all week, which gave me the window I needed to pack quietly and disappear. I took only what mattered: documents, clothes, devices. Left behind everything else, including the framed photos of us smiling on beaches and balconies and places I now suspected had been props in her long con. When she returned at night to an empty house and a changed lock, she didn't call. Didn't text. I think she knew the silence said more than any accusation could. At Arjun's place, I stared at the bare walls and listened to the hum of the refrigerator as if it might break the tension in my chest. He'd insisted I stay with him. I didn't argue. I couldn't trust a hotel. I couldn't risk being tracked through a card swipe or some app I'd forgotten to log out of. Isla had been in my accounts, my calendar, my passwords. She knew how I thought. I had to stay ahead now, even if it meant vanishing completely. Marianne sent the intercepted messages the next morning. She'd been working with a contact in digital forensics, tracing back communications from Isla's office network. Encrypted messaging, flagged keywords, flagged names. The search had unearthed something I hadn't been prepared for. Not just theft, not just manipulation, but betrayal layered with intimacy. I opened the folder. The subject line was short. Forwarded threads. Isla, Kiran. Kiran. The name meant nothing at first, just a syllable floating in a sea of unfamiliarity. But the second I opened the first message, the ground shifted. From Isla Monroe to Kiran Blackwell, March 2nd, 2:14 a.m. He's fading just like we planned. Every night, he takes it without question. He's slow, groggy. It's almost too easy. Just need to hold out until the last of the paperwork clears. Then we vanish. Then we vanish. I blinked hard. My hands went cold. The reply came 7 minutes later. From Kiran Blackwell to Isla Monroe, March 2nd, 2:21 a.m. Mykonos is booked. Suite overlooks the sea. Just you, me, and the quiet life we promised. You've done so well, love. Soon it's just us. Mykonos. A suite. A quiet life. This wasn't a side affair. This was a replacement plan. Another message, 2 days later. He's barely functioning now. He didn't even question the new form. Just signed. I think he thought it was something for taxes. You were right. Keep the voice calm, the hands warm, and they won't suspect a thing. Every word cut deeper. The care she used with me, the tone in her voice, the softness of her fingertips, all calculated. Every kindness and needle sliding beneath the skin unnoticed until it reached the vein. I kept reading. Kiran, you're sure he won't contest anything? We can't afford a court delay. Isla, he won't. If he tries, we have enough to call his judgment into question. Medical fatigue, erratic memory, unstable emotional states. He's already questioned himself out loud. All I have to do is amplify that. It wasn't just betrayal. It was engineering. She had crafted my collapse like an architect drafts blueprints. Every false smile, every dose, every gentle hand rubbing my back as I forgot who I was. And I almost let her. I closed the file and sat back, eyes burning. Arjun walked in, coffee in hand, paused when he saw my face. He said nothing. Just placed the mug on the table and sat across from me. I turned the laptop to him. Read them. He did. His jaw tightened with each line, eyes darkening. When he finished, he didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't try to explain it away. He just said, "We have more than enough." I'm not sure what hurts more, I whispered, that she wanted to erase me, or that she was going to celebrate after. I saw it so clearly now. Isla in a sundress on some rooftop in Mykonos, glass of champagne in hand, the sun hitting her just right while Kieran tucked an arm around her waist. Not mourning me, not missing me, just gone, like I'd never existed. But I had. I did. And now I had everything I needed to prove it. Marian filed the formal case the next day. Fraud, coercion, medical manipulation, identity theft. She moved fast, presenting digital evidence, documented timelines, expert evaluations. Arjun provided a professional assessment of the drugs Isla had used, outlining the symptoms they would induce, how long they'd stay in the system, and how difficult they'd be to detect in standard panels. Combined with the video footage and the messages, it wasn't just a case. It was a story. A man slowly stripped of autonomy under the guise of love. A woman masking erasure with affection. A partner replaced by a plan. Isla didn't know what was coming. Not yet. But she would. And I didn't plan on warning her. She made one attempt to contact me in email. Short. Cold. Subject, "Are you okay?" Body, "You disappeared. I'm worried. Call me when you can. We can talk. Whatever this is, we can fix it." No mention of the locks changed. No question about the missing files. Just a fake worry, a shallow hook cast into water she now realized was too deep. I didn't respond. She sent nothing else after that. Marian told me to be ready for retaliation. She'll pivot. Play the victim. She's not the type to surrender. Women like Isla don't crumble. They camouflage. And sure enough, a week later, her lawyers filed an emergency petition. In it, she claimed I was mentally unstable, potentially dangerous, that I had abandoned our marital assets and disappeared without notice. Her narrative painted me as unhinged, erratic, paranoid. But the timing betrayed her. She didn't know the court already had our timeline, already had the video, the forensics, the receipts. Her emergency petition was like setting fire to a field that had already been flood-soaked. The judge dismissed her motion within 48 hours. And with that, the legal tide turned. I was no longer the man she had tried to erase. I was the man writing the truth she thought would never be spoken. The hearing took place in a small courtroom tucked inside Edinburgh's Civil Court building. Glass walls, oak trim, and the faint smell of something sterile and polished, like justice and bleach. I sat at the front, in a navy suit that hadn't seen daylight in nearly a year. My hands were steady, my spine straight. Across from me, Isla sat flanked by two attorneys, neither of whom looked entirely convinced by the woman they were paid to defend. She looked immaculate, of course. Soft curls, modest blouse, minimal makeup. She wore concern like a costume. Wrinkled brow, twisted wedding ring on her finger. I scanning the courtroom with the practiced vulnerability of someone trying to convince the room that she was the one betrayed. But she didn't look at me. Not once. Because she knew. The judge was an older woman, stern and methodical. She reviewed documents with glasses perched low on her nose, eyes scanning line after line like each one was a test of her patience. When she finally spoke, the room quieted. "We are here today to examine the petition and subsequent evidence regarding claims of fraud, coercion, and attempted asset manipulation by one Isla Monroe against her husband, Mason Monroe." It didn't feel real until I heard those words. Then Marian stood. She laid it out with surgical precision. No drama. No embellishment. Just facts and footage. Exhibit A, the surveillance videos of Isla administering zolpidem into my tea. Exhibit B, the scanned forged documents with my name signed in a shaky mimic of my handwriting. Exhibit C, the chat logs between Isla and Kieran, discussing sedatives, disappearance, and a planned escape to Mykonos. And then came the expert testimony. Arjun took the stand and explained the effects of microdosing sedatives over long periods. It mimics natural burnout symptoms, he told the court. Fatigue, short-term memory loss, disorientation. Especially effective when administered by someone the victim trusts. He didn't flinch when he said, I advised Mason to begin preserving samples and capturing behavior. What he found confirmed our suspicions. The opposing counsel tried to twist the narrative. Mr. Monroe, isn't it true you became paranoid and began spying on your wife without her knowledge? I leaned forward. Yes. After months of unexplained fatigue, blackouts, and worsening confusion, during which my wife continued to prepare all my food and beverages, I took precautions. And these cameras, were they hidden? Discreet, I said calmly. Because I couldn't afford a confrontation until I had the truth. I didn't want accusations. I wanted evidence. Is it possible, the lawyer continued, that your mental health deteriorated and you simply misunderstood her actions as hostile? I stared at Isla then. Let her feel the weight of the silence between us. No, I said. I didn't misunderstand. I saw her. I recorded her. And I read the messages she sent to the man she planned to leave me for, after she stripped me of my identity. That quieted the room. When Isla finally took the stand, she cried. Of course, she cried. I never meant to hurt him, she whispered. Mason wasn't well. He was withdrawing, forgetting things, becoming erratic. I just wanted to help. Maybe I made some mistakes. Maybe I crossed a line trying to protect our future. But I loved him. I still love him. The judge didn't blink. Isla, she said evenly. Do you deny forging the documents presented in evidence? I don't remember signing anything like that. Marion stood. Your Honor, the metadata on the digital file timestamps the signature to 2:03 a.m. on March 2nd, immediately following a message exchange in which Ms. Monroe stated, and I quote, he didn't even question the form. Just signed. I think he thought it was something for taxes. Isla froze. Her lawyer reached for her arm. The judge leaned forward. You will answer the question. Isla's voice dropped to a whisper. No, I don't deny it. And that was the moment it ended. Not with a gavel. Not with shouting. Just the quiet collapse of a lie too fragile to stand against the weight of truth. The ruling came swiftly. All shared accounts were frozen and reviewed. The forged documents were invalidated. The power of attorney was deemed fraudulent. The judge granted a permanent restraining order, voided any financial transfers that had occurred under the false authorization, and referred the case for further criminal investigation. When the hearing ended, I walked past her without a word. She didn't reach for me, didn't ask for forgiveness. She just sat there, alone in the courtroom, the corners of her composure finally cracking. Outside, it was raining. A soft, cold drizzle that kissed my skin without apology. Arjun waited by the car. Marian stood beside him, files tucked beneath her arm like the job was done and the damage was finally charted. But the thing is, the damage never really ends. It just stops bleeding. I moved into a modest flat on the edge of town, quiet, minimal, safe. I changed all my passwords, locked every account, updated every digital fingerprint. My name was mine again. Sometimes, late at night, I still make tea. I heat the water slowly. I stir the honey myself. I sip it on the balcony with the wind brushing my face. I watch the lights of the city in the distance and let the stillness wash over me. And every time I take that first sip, I remember how close I came to losing everything. How easily it could have happened if I had just kept drinking. But I didn't. I didn't drink the tea. And because of that, I woke up just in time.